Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is still Eric, and today I want to talk to you about Li Auto and NIO. I want to talk about how these two companies and their cars or their products actually compare. You may have seen I made a review of Li Auto L9. I was really impressed with the car, much more impressed than my experience with the Li 1 a couple years back. And I do think that Li, in a lot of ways, really starts to compare favorably to NIO in ways that they maybe didn't previously. And I know a lot of the people who watch this channel, you're investors in NIO primarily. You might be wondering how the competition actually looks and fares and stacks up. So today I'm just going to compare the two companies essentially. Really only looking at the L9 because that's all I've recently driven on the next generation Li platform. Of course, the Li 9, Li 8, Li 7 are all pretty similar. And I'm going to compare that to my experience with NIO. Of course, I had a NIO EC6 on their Gen 1 platform. I've also driven extensively the ET7, which is their second generation car, and I've tested a couple other cars as well, namely primarily the ES6, which I also have a review of on this channel. So if you are just a NIO investor and NIO viewer of this channel, I do encourage you to watch the Li L9 review, because I will throw some B-roll over some of the clips and when I'm talking here, but I'm not going to give you a really detailed breakdown of every single thing. I'm just going to kind of really quickly compare each and every category that I'm interested in comparing. So let's get into it. The first category I will compare is the outside appearance, kind of your first impressions when you look at these cars, when you see them on the road driving around. Of course, it's highly subjective, but I would say personally, I find NIO's designs to be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more compelling, a little bit more, I would say, modern. Li Auto, the L7, L8, L9, and the Li 1, of course, they're all very, very similar cars. They share pretty much everything with regards to their styling. I think I mentioned in my video, it looks kind of like a Durango. When I see it, I'm reminded of Dodge Durango. So again, not the most stylish of cars. And that's not to say that NIOs are all wildly different either, because they share a lot of similar design language and design philosophy. Of course, the interiors are all very similar. Exterior, they all have the same shark nose is how NIO describes it. But thankfully, at least for me personally, with NIO, they do offer, not just kind of boxy rectangular SUVs, but they also have coupe SUV, they also have station wagon, they also have sedans. So they have more things that I'm interested in personally. So for the category one, I got to give it to NIO here in the terms of their design philosophy and how the cars actually appear and how they look. If I just had to choose based on visual appearance, primarily which car I would buy, whether it's a NIO or a Li, I wouldn't choose the ES6, I wouldn't choose an ES7, I wouldn't choose an ES8, I also wouldn't choose a Li 7, Li 8, or Li 9. I would choose probably an EC7 from NIO or an ET5 Touring, or maybe even an ET5 or an ET7, because I'm more of a sedan guy or kind of a sportier looking coupe SUV. I don't want a big giant rectangle. So next we're going to start with the interior appearance, not functionality or comfort or anything like that, just how it looks. So I would say that the Li Audio, to me, it feels a lot busier inside. Not that it's super busy, there's not tons of buttons everywhere, but it does have multiple screens. It has the two screens, front passenger and the center display screen. It also has LCD touchpad on the steering wheel. And then, of course, you can also opt to have another screen in the back. You also have physical buttons. You have physical vents that you can kind of move around, which is, more traditional. It doesn't have a lot of intricate stitching and detailing everywhere. And then even the ambient lighting inside the car is a lot more simple and basic. It's basically just a one strip around each door compared to the next generation NIO cars, which have fewer screens. They're more minimal and more sleek, and I would say more kind of like American Psycho, like Patrick Bateman, simple, clean lines, intricate stitching. For me personally, what I find it to be really more calming and soothing, and even the ambient lighting now in Gen 2 cars is much better compared to Gen 1. You might remember I said the Gen 1 ambient lighting is kind of cheap. It has some dead spots and things like that didn't make it look very nice. To me, it feels like Li Autos in the L9 I drove, ambient lighting is kind of like Gen 1 NIO lighting, whereas Gen 2 NIO lighting has floor lighting and waterfall lighting and all these different textures with the lighting, and you can combine different colors and things like that, which is pretty cool, kind of more customizable, but yet also kind of calming. It would depend on how you want to set your lighting up. So I do like that you can customize your cabin in more diverse ways, but they're not distracting ways. Whereas with Li Auto, I find it to be a little bit too much, which I talked about with, I don't need all these different screens and different options to play movies on 3 different screens or things like that. So I like it more simple, more kind of sleek and elegant and refined, up to you. But I would say in this category, NIO also wins. So I do think I should actually say at this point, now that we're at NIO 2, Li 0, I do want to be very objective. I try to, look at the truth of the situation and what I prefer. And I prefer the styling of NIO, and that's why they're currently sitting 2-0. But we're gonna get into some other things now. We're gonna talk about how Li actually does some pretty cool things that are better than NIO. So let's get into it. So when it comes to the interior of the car, and not just necessarily how it looks, but actually the comfort and the ride quality, I've always been a big fan of NIO's ride quality. I think it's very good, especially with the air suspension on the ET7 or on my EC6 and Gen 1 car. I thought it was tuned very well. I found it to be very comfortable. But again, if you watch my Li Auto L9 review, I think a combination of Li Auto having like super duper amazing comfortable seats, like super plush, almost like lazy boy recliner type seats, really, really high quality massage functions, good powerful air ventilation or cooling seats. I almost want to say there's no comparison between Li and NIO, but not quite. It's not quite that drastic, but it's very evident and very obvious. Like when you sit in the car and you drive a Li Auto around, it is super duper comfortable. It is so comfortable, like you wouldn't believe. And then even when you have they have their magic carpet air ride suspension, super duper well tuned, super smooth. I really had no complaints at all about like the ride quality. NIO also, I wouldn't have any complaints, except now that I've kind of driven and rode in an L9, I would say that NIO could be better. And I will say that the NIO ES6 seats that are self-developed, I got to drive that car and experience that car for a couple of days when I did that test drive event and that review, and it was very comfortable. No complaints. But if I have the ES6 for a week or for 10 days like I had the L9, maybe I can start to compare them. At this point I would say Li is on another level compared to NIO, and I think it's very evident just by sitting in the car and experiencing the car. And I think if you have a chance to test drive both cars, if you're in China, you definitely should. And even though I would argue that the material quality is much better in the NIO, like especially, maybe lower touch point parts of the car, like of course the seats in the Li are very plush, but if you kind of fiddle around different parts of the car, it's $20,000 less than an ES8. So probably the materials should be cheaper, right? Or not as good. So in that category, the comfort, the interior second living space, that Li Auto wins. And quite handily, really. Now, I would also like to kind of rate and review the drive quality, the handling of the car, things like that. But people have different needs. Li Auto is definitely more of like, they only make hybrid family cars. They're cars that they're not as sporty, pretty big. They handle well, but if you're buying a Li Auto L9 and you're also considering like an ET5, those are two different customers. The handling is going to be different. The ride quality is going to be different, and the way you drive the car is going to be different. I won't compare the two because you're after different things depending on what you want. I personally find NIO more fun to drive. They have a sportier feel. They're more youthful, I would say. But if you're driving like your granny and your kids and your wife around, a Li Auto is going to be very, very comfortable, and it's still going to be a pleasure to drive, I would say. What do you want? Okay, next we're going to take a look at the software of the cars, functionality, and the second would be speed. When it comes to functionality, I'd highly recommend you look at the L9 review I made. And also, you've probably already seen my NIO videos before. If you haven't, check out some of those. I put some links in the description about the OS and things like that. But with functionality, I find NIO's functionality to be very useful. I find the quick access menu to be very useful. You can customize it how you want very easily. You can also do smart functions and smart actions on the NIO. Everything I find laid out very well. There's not like layered menus and sub menus and things like that. Whereas on the Li Auto, I found the operating system to be a little bit confused, a little bit muddled. And, even after 9-10 days, I was still kind of digging through it, looking for certain things. Whereas I say with a NIO, after, a day or two, you're pretty much, where everything is. Maybe not entirely, but for the most part, the things you want to use. When it comes to the speed of the operating system of Li is like lightning quick. Everything is just super responsive all the time, immediately. There's been a lot of talk about NIO, either the operating system on Gen 1 cars starting to slow down, or just on Gen 2 cars kind of lagging and chugging sometimes. I never really had a huge problem with the NIO operating system, even on Gen 1 car, and definitely not on Gen 2. But it's amazing like how responsive the Li Auto system is. And again, that was with the Li 9 Max, I think. Yeah. So Li Auto also has, lower level cars like I think L7 Air, which only has like one 8655 Snapdragon Qualcomm chip or whatever. So I haven't tried that one. It might be, might lag, it might chug. I'm not sure. But with, their Max and their Pro cars, really responsive, although it's not as functional as NIO's operating system. It's much faster, and with over-the-air updates, both cars are capable of it. Probably the Li Auto can become more functional, and paired with this lightning speed. You might have to give it to Li Auto in the future, but at this point I would say 1-to-1 functionality, NIO, speed, Li. Now there's a couple things I don't necessarily care about. One of them would be downloadable apps and an app store. I don't play games in my car. I don't watch movies in my car, really. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I have a phone, I have an iPad, I have a Switch. And in fact, I would argue that a car is a worse platform to do these things, generally speaking, than a dedicated platform. Like for video games, I'd play a Switch. So I'm not going to review that, but my understanding is that currently Li has more apps and more games than NIO. They really focus on having like a living room experience with, multiple devices, and you can connect different Bluetooth connections to different TVs and watch multiple videos and play different games all at the same time, which, is pretty cool. But again, for me, having it or not having it is the same. So I can't really review that. If you want to, in your own scorebook, give Li Auto a check mark here, you definitely can. With regards to autonomous driving, I haven't got a chance to drive NOP Plus for NIO yet. I have driven, their standard NAD, I think it's called. I did drive Li Auto's autopilot on the highway, and I did use it in the city in traffic jams. They're very, very comparable, but again, haven't tried NIO's full-on autopilot yet. It's kind of hard to compare these two as well, because not every Li Auto is going to be equipped with full sensor array of autonomous driving. NIO makes sure every car has LiDAR and all the sensors they believe that you need for autonomous driving, whereas Li gives you the option. You don't really need to have autonomous driving if you don't want it. So again, this is kind of like a different philosophy and not really something you can necessarily compare. All right, so this video is getting way too long. I thought it'd be quicker. Let's power through the rest of this. When it comes to the app and the store, like NIO Life, you probably all know about, has lots of different physical goods you can buy, not just car accessories, but also lifestyle accessories, pots and pans, bedding, alcohol, food. You might not care about this when you buy a car, and I probably don't care about it when I buy a car either. Like when I bought my NIO, I didn't care about it. But I did find it to be something that was very interesting and exciting to be able to use NIO points on these products. Got a lot of stuff that I would have never necessarily tried or used. And I would give this to NIO here, but I will say that Li also has a lot of car accessories. And if really what's important when you buy a car is having accessories for your car, Li has a lot of very similar car accessories like air mattresses and tents and camping supplies. And so I will give a half check mark to NIO here, simply because they have more things outside of the kind of car ecosystem, as well as because of the point store you can use. You don't have to use money. Whereas Li, as far as I know, I've tried to figure it out using the app. They don't list any points, buy stuff on the app. It's only in RMB, Chinese yuan. So I think that you don't get points. But if I'm mistaken, please comment. So I will give half a check mark to NIO here. But they both have really the important stuff you need for the car, which I think is pretty valuable. The next category I will compare is the car purchase experience. And this is another category that I would say Li kind of really shines in. The thing about Li is they don't have very many options, right? I think this is a really important reason why Li Auto sells so many cars, and that's because it's very simple. Like, if you think about the car buying experience, like, you might be familiar with In-N-Out in America, right? So In-N-Out basically has hamburger, cheeseburger, double cheeseburger. That's their whole menu. Of course, their secret menu, whatever, that's not important. When you look at the menu, this is what you get. With Li Auto, same thing. When you buy a car, this is what you get. Like, if we look at here, I'll show you the L9, there's only one option you can add. Of course, you can choose color and the wheel type, whatever, the rims. But if I want to modify the purchase of this car, look what I can do. I can add a automatic extending like step under the car, make it easier to exit and enter the car. Now, if I buy an ES8, on the other hand, I can add, let me think about this. I can add, I can choose the battery size. I can choose if I want to buy it or if I want to rent it. I can choose the moon package for a different color logo. I can choose orange calipers. I can choose roof racks. I can choose anti-freezing windshield. I can choose an inbox for VR. I can choose a refrigerator. I can choose a tow hitch. I can choose Nomi or no Nomi. I can choose the key fob color. It's really, really cool to be able to customize the car exactly how you want it. But on the other hand, if I was going to be a normal person, don't know a lot about, cars. I see the cars are very similar size, similar price, similar range, whatever. And I say, oh my gosh, this car has everything and this car has nothing, but I can add things to it. Like, which buying experience is more straightforward and more simple and easier? Obviously, I always say the Li Auto experience is. A lot of people, like car fans, that want to customize their car. It's really interesting to be able to get exactly what you want. But a normal person, especially with a family type vehicle like a Li Auto, you know what? Just here's what it is. What you see is what you get. The car's going to be delivered quick because there's not so many options. Basically, every car is essentially exactly the same. It really helps them A, sell more cars, and B, deliver them very quickly. So I would definitely give this to Li Auto there. So next, I would love to compare things like the range, the fueling experience, especially like electric range. I would like to compare refueling at a gas station versus swapping your battery. I would like to compare Li's fast charging versus NIO's fast charging. But you know what? They're not really meant to be comparable, I would say. At least at this moment, when Li has a fully electric range, can compare it. But you know, the way you use the car is going to be different. Like most people probably expect to use their Li Auto using only electric, charging at night, going to work and back, school and back, you know, not using fuel tank. Whereas NIO, your experience is going to be different. So in the future, we can compare the two. But right now, I don't think it's really valuable to compare these. Final category we're going to compare is stock. So year to date, Li Auto is up $20, about 100%. NIO is up about 30%, which is about $3. So Li very clearly wins right there. You might need to go and change your investment strategy if you are only into NIO, but not financial advice. So that's my conclusion. Li is really not that far behind NIO in my assessment. They're obviously ahead of them in sales numbers and their stock performance. But you know, if I had to choose a car, I would obviously choose NIO. A big reason is fully electric. I don't want to deal with gas station or gas tank or dealing with how much electricity I have or how much gas I like. It's way too, for me, mafan. It's like, it's not confusing, but it's kind of a hassle. Just having a car, you charge up or use battery swap. Very easy, very convenient. And I do not want to deal with gas stations. So I would assume owning a Li Auto is going to be more expensive over time than owning a NIO, even though NIO starts off more expensive. You're probably gonna have more repairs with the Li Auto, though I can't say that for sure. Also, just paying for fuel if you go on road trips, very, very expensive here in China. You can charge up a NIO with a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, you know, for 100, 120 kwai. You can charge up a Li, both electricity and fuel, and it's gonna cost you 700 or 800 RMB. So I would, you know, even with paying a monthly fee, if you go on road trips, the NIO would be a better option there. Probably can't go wrong with either car if you are buying it based on what you know, what your needs are. If you need a family car, L9, big, comfortable. If you need a fully electric, nice kind of luxury car, go with a NIO. Anyway, bye-bye. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Auf Wiedersehen.